be better.
Should I just use the phone?
Yep. Give it a second.
All right. We'll get this.
I'll be right back. I
feel like I'm at the Nuremberg trials. Oh. Hello. Yeah, I've done that. It's a little better, yes, for sure.
Okay. Good. Well, welcome, and thank you for getting up so early LA time.
Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm sorry. Let me just lower the volume on this one. There we go. Okay, good.
All set now?
All set.
Okay. I'm just going to, here's an old reference. I'm going to use Andrew's phone like Phil Donahue's microphone.
Oh, yeah. In fact, you know, I just threw out an autographed picture I had of Phil Donahue that I sent to my mother, 30, 40 years ago.
Watch out, you're really dating yourself.
Oh.
Class is, what, 25? They're not getting out. Yeah. Average.
Yeah.
I will say, Norma, very talented and energetic.
Oh, good for you guys.
So just to refresh your memory, this group is very near the end of their 2-year graduate program. They're graduating with MFAs in about, I hesitate to say this out loud, 3 weeks or so. Among the great things in addition to their talent as writers and soon to be as showrunners is that, as I think I said to you, this is a very practical class. So the focus is not so much on doing what we're doing today, but actually making stuff, writing it.
So great, so great. Are you actually filming it?
Yeah, you guys have been, right? Throughout the 2 years, they've done a lot of individual projects, and probably more importantly for television, a lot of collaborative projects.
Oh, fantastic!
So Norman Steinberg, the creator of the program, I hope is going to walk in a couple of minutes.
Oh, I've always wanted to meet him. I'm going to be very nervous.
At least virtually today, soon in person. And I was going to say also, and I know, Norm, you'll appreciate this, not only as a professional, but as a father of 2 adult daughters, that they all also work while they've been in this program. So everybody has a fair measure of professional experience, a lot of, some folks have worked for networks, a lot of people on productions, casting places, really, really good experience. So
fantastic.
Your bio was so entertaining and illuminating that rather than doing what I normally do, which is sort of walk people through how our guests have gotten to be who and what they are, I'm going to jump around a little bit. You actually raised, I thought, a whole host of issues that hopefully will be relevant to this group in particular.
Oh, that's so good.
And one of them is, and I think it gets to something that the students know about and have already experienced themselves, and that is, I wonder if you could talk about what you have viewed as the differences, the pluses and minuses of writing and producing as an individual versus as part of a team, because you're the great model on both ends. You've had a long, successful partnership, and then you've had a lot of years of success yourself.
Yeah.
So I wonder, and start by kind of analyzing that.
Well, Tom and I both started out individually, so we had no other dreams about ever writing with somebody. We both thought in our young, cocky stage of our lives that we would do it alone. In fact, I remember Tom saying when he wrote, he went to Cornell, when he wrote his first Mary Tyler Moore script, talk about dating ourselves, he had to decide whether he was going to quit school or go straight to Hollywood when they finally buy his script. Well, that didn't exactly happen. So he was going it alone for about 3 years, and the same for me. I was going it alone for about 4 years. Tom probably wrote 2 to 3 times as many spec scripts as I did, and got nowhere. He became unemployed, as I wrote in the bio. and I was unemployed. So it really became a desperate time in our lives. So, and like I said, he had no intention of writing with me until I brought him for that 45-minute walk, and he finally changed his mind, and everything else clicked into place. Once we started working together, I'm telling you, it really comes down to this. There's no way, as I look back, that it could have been any other way. And if it wasn't going to be Tom, it was going to be a great group of staff writers that I worked with, that helped me, that taught me. Because as I've learned over the years, you can't become successful alone. So whether it's a writing partner or a mentor, or you get lucky enough to get on a staff that really babies you along, I would never even consider not writing with somebody, especially back then. And once you started working on TV shows as a team, I counted on him, he counted on me. He filled in all my weaknesses, I filled in his weaknesses. And back then, Tom actually was better at the form than I was. So his patience, coupled with the patience of the freelance producers, and then Dave Merkin and Doug Wyman on Newhart, who really, really taught us a lot. We eventually started brick by brick learning how to write this form. And don't forget, we worked together for about 16, 17 years, and probably would have got another 16, 17 years, but everything started changing, and we see the change now. And we felt like, as I put in the bio, there was no way we could repeat what we accomplished in those 17 years. So we thought, well, let's split up, and I'll help you if I hit something, and you'll help me if you hit something. Tom ultimately moved back to Casanova, and I'm still here. But I will say this: there was a transition period when, here, don't forget, you're counting on this person. It's a marriage. You're married for 17 years. Sometimes, most of the time, I saw Tom more than I saw my wife, and under extreme pressure. So you don't even think as a writer you can do it alone. I really didn't think I could possibly write a situation comedy alone. But once we made that decision, and it was like a scene out of Sex and the City. It was like a rainy Monday when we met at Jerry's Famous Deli, and we decided to break up. And it actually would be a funny scene sometime. These two men who decide they're just going to go it alone. And so, but ultimately, once we made the decision, I went home and I felt so liberated in a way, because by that time, Tom had a life and I had a different life, and we weren't beholden to each other's schedules anymore. So I went home, and my first spec script, actually, and here, don't forget, I've been doing it now for 17 years. I now have to go back and write a spec script, because all the industry knew was Seeley and Gunzenhauser. So I sat down in my office and wrote a spec Sex and the City script, and it was I think it's a really good script, and I never did anything with it, but it actually taught me that yes, I can do it by myself, and that's sort of the way it rolled. And I had little minor successes, certainly nothing compared to what Tom and I went through. But it ultimately led to this new career that I have. And I wasn't afraid to go into these offices by myself. I wasn't afraid to pitch episodes for Russia by myself. I ultimately realized that both Tom and I picked up a lot of tools along the way. I always look at writers a little bit like golfers. You have your bag. And you either have 2 or 3 clubs in this bag, which a lot of writers do, or you have 10 or, I'm not a golfer, 10 or 11 clubs in here that you can always pull depending on the situation. And so I felt like I had that bag of 10 or 12 clubs to pull when I needed it. So it gave me this newfound confidence and blah, blah, blah. So now that I'm by myself, it is sort of really, really nice to just, you feel footloose and fancy free to be able to go someplace and not have to worry about that other person or ask permission from that other person. But when it comes to the deadline of working day by day on situation comedy, I would say find a partner if you find that right partner.
Norm, you talked about the way that you and Tom complemented one another as writers for all the years you guys were together. You know, I recall that the sort of alternate concept of the so-called non-writing executive producer has sort of gone in and out of vogue. I guess I would ask if you've experienced it, what you think about it, and as you look back, might that have worked for you, or do you think it was necessary that your partner was in fact another writer?
Well, then I'm getting into this whole thing, and we talk about this a lot out here. As writers, we were idiots. We were such morons that we didn't realize that we could make those same, because really a non-writing executive producer, more times than not, was an executive at a studio that, and because of the change in the industry, because FinCEN was repealed, because a lot of the big production companies went out of business, like Witt Thomas and Carsey Werner, suddenly it opened up this hole where almost like the movie business, where now you go to a producer, you pitch them your idea, and they in turn have the contacts in the business to go out with you and help you sell it. But the problem is that they are theoretically the seller, but you're going to them almost like a buyer. They are supposed to be your partners, but in a sense, you're trying to impress them because they now have so much power that you feel, you look at them as the buyer. And so I really have a big problem with this, not because of them, but because of the writer. The writer should have, all of us should have conjured up all these relationships and did what they're doing now, but we didn't. So now we're beholden to these group of non-writing executive producers who either have a connection to the talent or to the executives at the network. And I really, day by day, don't have that much contact or experience with them because I'm doing my own thing. I understand why they're there. And by the way, if I walk into one of their offices tomorrow and they love my comedy, I'll love that non-writing executive producer. But right now, I really have such a hard time that the writer didn't take on that role, because now you're working with somebody who really isn't any different than the network person that you're pitching. And so I'm really glad I did it the way we did it. I'm really glad that Carsey Werner and Witt Thomas and all these other companies existed back then, because you felt more like they were partners and they protected you a lot more when it came to differences of opinion between you and the network. I felt like they were a really great ally. And I'm not sure about this. I think these non-writing executive producers have so many shows that you have to ask yourself, how important is your show to them, really? When the shit hits the fan, are they going to be there for you? And so when it came to that, to work with Tom was great because we both talked the same language, even though we were very different in personality and humor. But we knew that we were talking the same language. And so our first drafts, our second drafts were like most people's fourth or fifth drafts. We were tough on each other. We were screaming, and in the old days, we were screaming and yelling at each other because we were inexperienced and also a lot of pressure on us. And then ultimately found our groove and really learned to work more civilly together and built these really strong scripts. So, I don't know.
We happen to have a guest in 2 weeks from the Writers Guild East. So we'll probably put this together. Curious from your perspective, both in terms of number of years and now seeing the side of the business through your international. Do you think that leverage that you were just alluding to, which you're bothered by the fact that writers essentially gave it away to too many of these people. Do you think it can ever be recaptured, or has that ship sailed?
Well, with this is my opinion, and I don't know that much about this, but my gut reaction is yes. I think it can be recaptured, but I don't know if it will. I think we'll make the exact same mistakes again. But what I was going to say is once TV and the web really integrate, and it becomes one thing. You look at your dishwasher. You don't look at it as a dishwasher and a computer, but it is both. And that's ultimately, I think, where television is going to be. We're not going to differentiate between, and we're starting to see the chasm weld right now. But I think if we can now own our own stuff by producing our own stuff on the web, or whatever it's going to be called, I still can't believe we're using the word television. I mean, doesn't television sound ancient? It sounds like something you would have said in the 40s and 50s.
It does, but you'll be glad to know with this group, we spend, I think, enough time now talking about Amazon and Netflix and Hulu anyway. That to me, now the best examples of what you're saying. I mean,
fantastic, yeah.
Digital services as streaming services, as the new HBO, Showtime, etc. But it's kind of proving their point. And this group, which is going to be working for and selling to them soon, I think is already thinking the way you're describing. So. Yeah,
I think don't give it away, guys. Just really, because you're going to be working really hard on these ideas, and if you guys can be both manager and talent all in one, you'll not only be happier and less frustrated, but richer. And I think there's a chance to do that.
We have a question now from Hall of Famer Norman Steinberg.
Wow, this is Norman Steinberg.
I just want to tell
Norman, I've wanted to meet you for one reason. I've never met another Norman.
Well, I'm a Norman, you're a Norman.
Oh, nice to meet you.
I don't go by Norm because I always feel like the next line is Norm, fill her up. And it's
I know, exactly. I was so glad the 80s disappeared so Cheers could finally go off the air and we were not hit with, hey, Norm, what's happening?
Listen, let me tell you, you got so much reaction to your bio. People loved it. They just said, I got to see this guy. So you're legendary with our folks. And you think your partnership would have lasted? Are you hearing me okay?
Oh, yes, now I do.
You think the partnership would have lasted longer in the age of Skype?
No, I don't think so. I think, you're put under so much pressure on a day-to-day basis when you're working on these shows that I don't think Tom and I would have tackled that. I don't think so. I can't talk for him, but I would say it would have been weird to work that way. Yes, we could have done it when it came to later drafts and just punching up things here and there. But the day-by-day, building of these scripts, no, I don't think so. It would have been hard.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you. We have, and some of them are. We're into. Remember that Eddie Cochran song, "The Summertime Blues"? We're into that. It's about 75 degrees here today. People going crazy. So.
Oh, and I talked to Mitch when I was there the last time. I so miss New York. So miss it. So.
Well, come here.
Oh, Mitch knows. We were talking about. I'll just stay at the studio.
I'd just like you to impart your wisdom to them. Going out now, where would you go? How would you do it? This is a practicum here, which we're trying to start careers, and because we want to give them the life that you and I have had as writers. Yeah. And what you're saying, it's a great life. And
you had a much more exciting life than I did. It's just fantastic.
Yeah,
you did.
I had an ex-wife that even playing field. So.
Oh, I don't believe it for a second.
So, but tell them what you think. what would you do if you were one of them and starting?
Well, the first question I would like to ask them is, how many of you think or want to move to Los Angeles?
We're seeing
So about 70%.
virtually every hand go up. And by the way, despite Norman's best urging to keep them in New York, but I think that reflects not confidence in his opinion and more just, jobs. The reality of, on a volume basis, more jobs in LA.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, as we know, it's all about the edge. And, so what's going to give you the edge? And obviously will everybody be writers? Does everybody want to be script writers?
Yeah.
Yeah. For television?
No, it's a great question. We've had a few discussions about other ways that writing skills might be applied down the road, but everybody is here as a writer. Sam, more interested in features?
I think so.
Okay. I would say one at the moment more interested in features, the others on the whole television first, but I mean that's a built-in bias because the program is a TV writing and producing program.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue it's Norman in creating the program just being wise to what you and I have known for years, which is even better.
Yeah. It's just better. It's better.
And for the last 10 years or so, it's been, I think, arguably better creatively.
And look, Steven Soderbergh is about to start developing a second series for TV. These movie guys know that it's just, you can get deeper into character, you can grow with your characters. If you're lucky enough to work with a staff of writers that you love, you can work with them for years and years. And the actors, you get to work with actors who at the beginning you may not even like, but as you go through the war together, you become this family. And that's what you get in television, a family. And I remember hearing Alan Alda always talk about that before I broke in, about MASH, and how he will never be able to replicate that type of family. And that's the greatest thing about television. So,
just for context, we've talked a lot about the traditional ways. Before the digital era, how one sold specs, got an agent, first staff job, rose to the ranks, etc. And we know that's still a very viable model, but we've also talked about, the newer ways, people doing their own digital series and hoping to sell those and somewhat circumventing the process. I think the way Norman asked it to me is great. If you were now breaking in, but with the benefit of knowing what you know about the world, what would you recommend to this group? Because they're literally at that precipice. I mean, they're about to graduate and they all want to work.
Let me back up by just saying, because I'm always going to come at it from a very fortunate writer, a guy that never chased the money and never wanted to do it for just selling something. The first place I would start, and no matter if you stay in New York or come to Los Angeles, don't worry about the selling part of it. This is just my opinion. Worry about just coming up with a great story, a story that you love, characters that you love. And yes, then you have to design it to make sure it has legs so it lasts 5, 6, 8, 10 years. Although I don't think we're going to see that often anymore. So start with the love of the writing. That's the first thing I would do. Secondly, I don't know, I would grab a camera so quickly and create my own channel on YouTube or whatever other webs that I don't know anything about. And I would create my own stuff. My stepson right now is taking a group of his actor friends, who they all graduated from UCLA, and they're about to start on their own web series. He sat down and he wrote, I don't even know how many, 6 or 7 episodes, maybe 8 episodes. And they're actually targeting a young guy that has a lot of followers on YouTube, trying to get him to come aboard their show and create some buzz over this thing that he's creating. And that's exactly what I would do. Oh my God, I would do it so quickly. Then you don't have to ask anybody's permission. You don't have to wait for a buyer. You could just do it. And it's funny, I wrote a play last year, a very short 15-minute play that I put on at a small theater here. I'm telling you, I think there were 99 people there every single night. through 8 performances. I had more of a thrill sitting in the audience and watching those 99 people than I ever did, knowing that I had 4 or 5 or 10 million people watching an episode of mine. There was just something so powerful about it, and I think that's the same thing with this web. You're going to look on your computer and see how many hits you got, and you'll be thrilled if 3,000 people saw your show. So that's what I would do. But getting back to the other part of it, I also would bite the bullet and move to Los Angeles, at least at the beginning, because you can't take any chances. You know, it's, as I said earlier, it's all about the edge, and you have to have an edge over other people who want to do it. And I, from my experience, had that moment in time when I did move to Los Angeles, and I almost didn't. I was working as a page in NBC, and I was offered a lot of jobs there, but I wanted to write. So I finally sucked it up and got on a plane in 1980 and moved there, or moved here. I'm so used to being in Moscow, I'm saying here and there, while a lot of my friends stayed in New York. And the argument is, well, we've got William Morris and ICM and CAA here, which is all true. But there's just something different about eventually moving here. There's just something that happens when you're surrounded in this company town to your career. And there's no guarantee you're going to make it. There's no guarantee. But I think you have a better chance by coming out here. But the short answer is I would get on the web and create my own series. I'm really thinking about doing it now.
I'm curious, does your stepson ask you for notes on his scripts?
No, you know, he's a trained actor. He's a really good actor, but he's also a really, really good writer. And I've read his screenplays, and they're just so good that I don't even want to. If he asks me, I will do it, but so far he hasn't asked me, and I don't think he's going to need help because he's surrounded with former roommates from UCLA. So I think by the time they're done, they're going to end up with a pretty good series.
Norm, I wanted to ask you something that you alluded to in your bio. You and Tom had your experience in the world of running a hit show, and then even rarer, of leaving it and returning to it.
True, yeah.
So I'm just curious if you
Let me just tell you, don't do what we did. Don't do it.
So if you can be a good cautionary tale, can you describe to this group what your thinking was at the time and what you've learned that would caution against now, all these years removed from it?
Well, not so many years, because I think I've got this permanent black and blue mark on the back of my leg from kicking myself for year after year doing what we did. We were such idiots. We knew the show was going to be a hit, which we didn't know the first 10 or 12 shows, 10 or 12 episodes. But we knew it was going to be a hit, and yet we still left. And we are akin to McLean Stevenson and all these guys leaving hit shows and then going absolutely nowhere near where they were when they were on the show. The reason we left was because we were a partnership and we were getting paid bupkis. And all of a sudden Paramount shines this beautiful little shiny object, coins and money, and we got seduced. And also we just won an Emmy Award. So we were feeling pretty darn good about ourselves. And when Paramount came, we thought, oh, geez, we're going to create the next big hit show. We're good enough writers, which we were. We're going to take the deal. And everybody in that room would have taken that deal. But and I would have taken the deal again, by the way. But it was a huge mistake. We weren't ready. We also, one of the questions you asked me, Mitch, was, what was it again?
Was it about leaving and coming back?
Yeah, no, but even earlier on your email, it was, what do you wish somebody had told you that you didn't know at the time? And I wish somebody had told us to make sure you understand the business as it is, that it isn't always about great writing and being a great showrunner. Sometimes it's just about learning the politics of the business. If you're a belt maker, you make a really great, you love this belt. This is the funniest belt you could possibly ever make. Everybody's going to buy this belt. And then you walk into Starbucks and say, do you want the belt? Well, we don't buy belts. We buy beans. And that's the way it felt. You know, we were creating one thing and the network wanted something else, but we were too stupid and inexperienced to understand that you have to understand the needs of the buyer before you walk in, no matter how good it is. And I just had a lunch with the former head of Nickelodeon, Larry Jones, and he put it very, very well. You've got a box, and the network has already done the research. They know what their needs are. So now their job is to fill the box. And so they know they're looking for a drama, maybe a detective series, maybe a family series. And you walk in and you pitch something about the Army. Well, I don't care how good your pitch is. They're not interested in the Army show. They want a family show. So that's really what we didn't understand. And so we got the money, but in 2 years' time, we were persona non grata here. We were yesterday's news. So that's what I would do is really understand the business. And I'm sorry, Mitch, what was your original question?
Well, no, I think you answered, and if I can just add on to it, because I think it's so important what you're sharing. You're right, obviously, as you and I have discussed, you guys understand the ages we were. And again, coming off of, an award-winning year, a hot show, etc., it was hard to resist the siren song of the money. It's also hard to resist the siren song of development, because you're right, you always go in thinking we've got the next great show in us. And you likely do, right?
And you believe at 32, let's say, you believe that you're so good that the writing is going to trump everything else. We just believe that our writing was better than everybody else's, so why shouldn't we get a show on the air? And it doesn't work that way.
I also tend to forget how in a hit show in a way is a miracle each time over, right? And you think, oh, it's because we did this, we wrote it well, we cast it right, and then you just realize it's remarkable that any of those comes together.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've done it, Mitch, and I'm sure you've done it, Norman. You walk down the hallway and I'm thinking about Warner Brothers. You walk down the hallway and you see all these frame shots of all these shows that never made it. And you look at the cast and you go, of course it didn't make it. Look at this cast. They just don't gel. And then you pass the Friends poster and you go, all right, this is going to be a hit show. And that's it.
Norman, it's funny you say that, because I always tell people, I always use Friends as an example where I say, so you've got a show which relies on the chemistry of 6 people, right? We know, having been around shows, if we had 3 great people cast in the right roles, we'd be celebrating, thinking, we beat the odds right here. But to have 6 people where they all work out, they're all right, they all stay for the full run of the show, that is just, that's odds defying. Right?
Oh, yeah. It is like winning the jackpot in Vegas, right? I mean, and the chemistry, it's all about the chemistry. And what if 5 or 6 of the people on Murphy Brown actually did come aboard, but we ended up with Heather Locklear, which the network wanted? Would the show have been a hit? I don't know, maybe, but I don't know.
I would argue probably not,
I would argue that too.
I think also, your description about the network needs is so important. And I would go a step further and say, very often, and by the way, I worked for Larry and I've worked at, as you know, a lot of networks, it's not even necessarily as well thought out as we need a family show, we need a detective show, or whatever. We just need a show Thursday night at 8 o'clock. I mean, in the old days, and even now, while we're all taken with what seems to be relatively Netflix and Amazon, their businesses are evolving, and either there already are mandates internally that none of us yet knows as viewers or creators, and or there soon will be, right? So I think you're right, both to start with what you know to be genuinely good, but also at the same time be very mindful of what the business is. And those two are not mutually exclusive. The happy medium for me is, and in a way, when I worked for Larry, we were a little bit of this. We talked about, if you're lucky enough to catch a network we've had a couple of guests from different networks like IFC and True TV. So at different stages in their development, where they've been able to describe to us how networks decide what their identities are. But I always use the example of like Bravo before it was Bravo, where they didn't know what they were going to be, and one hit show turned them around and then set the course for 15 years, right? Yeah. And similarly, even the people at USA right now, to their credit, are publicly admitting, you know what, because of Mr. Robot, it's a different game for us. And it's not even now that we're going to be the Mr. Robot network, we're just going to be, let's try this, the Let's Do Different Stuff network, yeah. Right? It's an amazing opportunity for creators. Now, tend to be few and far between, but I would say if you have your brothers or you're in your agent are smart enough to see, you know what, it's like seeing real estate that has great value but hasn't been developed yet. Yeah. See a channel and go, there's something, either they haven't figured it out or there's this one little show that suggests their direction. If you can come in as the person with the thing that may just catapult them to the next level, you're a hero in every way, and hopefully you have a lot of freedom and a lot of fun to do your show, right? The way you see it.
Yeah,
I want to ask you about the state of
I'm having a little hard time hearing, Norman.
The state of comedy today, because I think it's changed. But what we went through, you made me think of an incident. Jay Tarsus and I created a show for Magnum.
Tom Selleck?
Tom Selleck. And I called Les Moonves because I did him a favor. I said, we got a comedy with Tom Selleck. And he said, "Oy." I thought, oh, this is a slam dunk. Jay is a great writer, Jay Tarsus. And then I said, Jay Tarsus and I are going to do it. And he said, "I don't want to work with it." But we went in and tried to sell it to ABC. And it was a show about baseball. It made me think, nobody wants a show about baseball. Washed up baseball player. It's the last thing you want to sell. And you got to know what they want. We went to ABC, and I forget the woman who was the head of ABC. But Tom walks into the room, and they kind of just stared at us. The woman was wearing a silk shirt, and I just remember walking down the hall past all those pictures, and Tom said, "Well, she seemed excited to see me." Okay, you It was so stupid. We sold it to NBC.
Whoa.
And we made the pilot. Then it didn't go. So you're absolutely right. But I want to know about what is comedy today, because I'm not sure anymore. You have the CBS lineup, which has some hits, the Two Broke Girls and Big Bang. Yeah, Big Bang.
But
and Modern Family. But I'm not sure what I would write for a half-hour comedy. I don't know. I don't know what that market is anymore. Do you?
No, I don't understand it. I don't understand. As funny as it is, I don't understand how, in today's time, The Big Bang Theory or 2.5 Men or most of these truck lorry shows aren't even on the air anymore, because it just doesn't seem like that's the business anymore. And I honestly don't. Now, what I'm loving to see Louis. We went through a moment in time where these comedies were so terrible, they stood for nothing. And this is the only time I'll sound like a 60-year-old man. But in my day, you wrote episodes that said something. Even if it was as silly as Newhart, you were writing something that meant something to you. And these shows in the late 80s and mid 90s were nothing. Were vanilla. But now Louis comes along and he talks about stuff. And yes, while he became way too melodramatic about certain themes, I loved seeing this. I love seeing Master of None. I love, even though I don't watch it all the time, I love what they're trying to do. I love that it's starting to mean something. It's taken on some kind of deeper meaning than fart jokes and stupid haircut jokes, which to me is Two Broke Girls. I don't understand that at all. And the thing I don't understand is Michael Patrick King is a great writer. I don't think they come any better. And I don't understand, and he's got more money than God. I don't understand why he wouldn't take a chance and come up with something that's more meaningful. I just don't understand it. Now, I do understand Veep. I do understand Louis. I do understand Archer. I love Archer. But I love the shows that are taking on sort of an edge. And the rest of these shows I don't understand. I don't understand why I don't know who's watching it, number one. The ratings are so low, it's hard to gauge if anybody's watching these things anymore. There's a girl, Miranda Sings, on YouTube that brings in more viewers than most of these shows on the network. And in fact, they're doing a show with her on Netflix because she's got whatever, 6 million viewers. So I agree with you, Norman. And then what's happening is Louis C.K. is a really talented guy, so he knows how to do this stuff. But then they created a show called Catastrophe, and my wife and I loved this first season. Couldn't wait for the second season to start. It was edgy and funny and a little rough along the edges. It wasn't polished. And then the second season started, and I don't understand what they did. I don't understand how they jumped the shark in the course of one season. And so I don't know. I don't know what's going on out there. I do know I'm writing a couple things now that I'm mindful of what's going on, so I'm trying to incorporate that stuff into my scripts and trying to bring in the zeitgeist of what's going on today. So I'm attempting to see if I know what I'm talking about. So we'll see.
You know, to go back to your baseball show idea, I don't mean to sound at all Pollyannish in saying this, but I think one of the good things about the creative era that you all are going out into is that I'm not sure there are rules anymore. You know, in the era that you guys were coming up, it was sort of it was a spoken rule. You don't do a show about baseball. You know, you don't do movies about baseball, and you don't do movies about the Revolutionary War, and you know, remember that, you know. And I kind of think now it's much more. You can't do a show about baseball until you do a show about baseball. Yeah. You know, it just, you know. You spelled it down. Exactly, yeah. Exactly. And that all that mattered, that was what Danny McBride wanted to do, you know, and enough people found that funny, or, you know, it's not that many years ago that it would have been crazy if any of us had said, so I have this idea for about an ad agency in 1960.
Yeah.
You know, to the second sentence of the pitch. Right.
Right. Which is very exciting. It's so exciting what's going on out there. You know, you can look at it two ways. One is those damn network people, they don't know good from bad. They don't know how to read a script. How am I ever going to sell a show? Or you can say, oh, those network people, they don't know good from bad, so I'm going to walk in and believe through the roof that mine is the best thing in the world and sell it. You could absolutely use that to your advantage today, which I find it so exciting what's going on. I wouldn't even be writing scripts, by the way, if this new thing wasn't happening out there. But I truly believe, even at 60, that I could sell one of these two shows. I truly believe it. And plus, there are so many places to bring it. And what you're saying, Mitch, is absolutely true. They're still developing, so they really don't know what their whole thing is. And so you walk in and maybe show them what their next thing is, the way Matt Weiner did with Mad Men.
Right. Do you think, is it possible you would not, by the way, I think it's great and remarkable that you're as optimistic as you are. Again, I think because you have a sense of what the marketplace is, do you think...
There's another reason, Mitch. There's another reason. As all of us probably can say, I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how to build. I don't know how to make that belt. I don't know. I really wish, I'm telling you, I wish I knew how to do something else. I would be doing it right now, but I don't.
You also have now a new kind of staff job, in effect, which is your Russian one, right? So it seems to me that that's a nice base from which to operate. You might be, I'm guessing, not quite as optimistic, only developing.
True. That's true.
So actually, if we can shift gears, we've had a couple other guests talk about this, but I don't know anyone now quite as experienced as you are. How many Russian shows have you done at this point, or Russian versions of American shows?
5 or 6. Actually did like probably 4 or 5, and then one original that we actually just developed over there, which was exciting.
So can you talk for a minute about what you've learned or relearned about our business by helping out in a foreign country?
Well, probably the first thing is, boy, we had some really good shows back then. My first show was Bewitched, and I didn't, I was a kid. I was 8 years old, and I realized once I was looking at these scripts going, these are really good scripts. And the cool thing about it, because I'm such a fan of television, that I was walking in the footsteps of Bernard Slade and Danny Arnold and somebody else, I'm sorry. I was actually working alongside of these people.
Yeah.
And so for that, it was nice to appreciate what we've done in the past. And then about to start Roseanne over there. But on the other hand, the other part of it I realize is how talented we are over here, because all of us have grown up with television, because it's just part of our DNA at this point. We don't realize it, but we have really accrued a lot of talent in our bodies. We know a lot more than we even think we know. And that's especially true when you start working with writers who didn't have the luxury of growing up with these shows, who aren't naturally funny people. And I know it's the land of Tolstoy and Chekhov, but to be honest with you, it must have skipped many, many, many generations, because the group of people that I've worked with over there, especially 7 years ago, didn't know their ass from their elbow. And you're sitting there. Some days you are showrunner. Some days you're kindergarten cop. You're trying to wrangle these monkeys to try to sit still. They spent more time going outside to smoke than they did to work. And in fact, there's a funny little joke in Russia when you walk into, because everybody smokes there. You walk into a restaurant there, and the hostess comes up to you and says, you say, I'd like to have a table. She says, where would you like to be seated? Smoking or, I blew the joke. Oh.
Me too.
Oh, no. I'll think about it. Oh, I blew the joke. All right, forget it.
You can say it.
That's it. Where would you like to sit? Smoking or chain smoking? So that was the joke. It's early here.
No worries. And how about then in creating the original show? What was that like, where you didn't have an American blueprint off of which to operate?
Are you talking about like Murphy Brown and these shows?
One of the Russian shows.
Oh, that was really, really fun. That's a show I didn't even want to take, because I was just coming off of mending my ways with Sony, and suddenly they wanted me to work on a show that was a little bit like the Wonder Years. And I'm sorry if I'm bringing up all these shows from the past, but it really was a college kid or a middle-aged man looking back on his college years just before the fall of the Soviet Union. So look, I had to go 7,000 miles to get my single camera experience. I only worked on multi-cameras here. And so for me, it was, looking back now, it was the greatest thing in the world. And the pressure on you was great. See, I don't like roller coasters, and I don't like jumping out of planes, but I love being under pressure. And we had the ultimate pressure. We had to do 13 episodes of a show that wasn't even created, working with a staff that didn't understand the show, and it had to be shot. I think we started in July. It had to be shot in September. So we literally had no show, no outlines, no scripts, no writers that understood the show, and they were stubborn as mules. The Russians have this great ability to be arrogant without the talent to back it up. So I'm telling you, for sure. Those same guys today are multi-zillionaires and are running a company that's doing so many TV shows, and it's all on the back of this show that we did in a matter of months. And on top of that, in Russia, we're doing 2.5 episodes a week, like the old days. 2.5 episodes a week, and so we use up these scripts like that. So
is it also the old way, the old days in terms of writing an entire season before you then shoot?
Yeah, it is. It is very much like that. Not so much now. Everybody Loves Raymond is being written and shot so quickly. They have a terrible schedule. But you're right. For the most part, it is designing these shows and then taking that stack of scripts and shooting them. And what made this show so great was it was single camera outside in potato fields, and some days I felt like we were shooting a David Lean movie. It was so big. And the show became this huge hit, and it's still going. In fact, I just came back this past year working on that for about 5 weeks. They wanted me to go back to help it out. So it was exciting, and especially when the show becomes a big hit. And really, I haven't created that many shows in my career, so it was nice for me.
What's your sense of roughly how the budgets compare?
You can't compare. They're done so cheaply. The actors at the beginning of these episodes, of these series, you're lucky if they're getting paid $500 a day. And I think Raymond right now is more, but in the beginning, our budget was something like anywhere from $38,000 to $64,000 an episode. Yeah. So it's a whole different ballgame because there are no unions. There's nobody to protect the writer. There's nobody to protect the actors. So they worked them to death, which meant they worked me to death because I was outside at 4 o'clock in the morning on top of a roof in the middle of winter shooting these scenes. And I remember talking to the head of Sony one night. My face was so cold that I had to stand in front of these big movie lights just to warm myself up so I could talk. So you can't really compare it.
Norm, I'm curious, just to sort of connect the different worlds, as you are now developing your own original stuff with an eye toward, American traditional channels or digital or whatever, are you finding in LA, in Hollywood, does your experience in Russia mean anything? Does it add any business or creative currency, or do they just not care about that?
I don't think they care about that, but I think what it does for me is it's a little bit what you said earlier. It makes me feel good about myself. So when I walk into these rooms, I'm not walking in as an unemployed 60-year-old man. I feel like it's not so much that I have that in the Russian thing in my hip pocket, but I absolutely think I look better now than I did 10 years ago, and that's a lot to do with my new wife, by the way. But I also just feel so much better about myself. To be honest with you, for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years, I could not write. I just could not sit down to write, and now I'm back to feeling this mojo in me, and so I want to take advantage of it while it's still there. But they don't care. The great thing about this town is they think it's the only business in town in the world. And there's this whole global market. By the way, going back to that, this is something that you guys really should look into, is this whole global market is going to just explode. And Mitch was the first one to introduce me to it because I had no idea. It's akin to The Truman Show, that movie, The Truman Show. You live in your little town and you live your life, and you don't realize on the other side of that wall, there's a whole other world going on. And that's the way it is. Los Angeles thinks Los Angeles is the only game in town. And the writers are all pecking after the same loaf of bread, the same crumbs on the ground. They're all there just fighting like dogs when there's a whole other thing going on because I may very well be in Korea, and Russia's where I am now, but Korea, Chile, Italy. We're just starting out now in China, of course. And so that's where I think you guys are coming up at just the greatest time in the world. I think there's going to be a perfect storm of the ability to create your own stuff, to go outside the boundaries of either New York or Los Angeles, and find whatever suits you. You know, if I was graduating, I would want to be graduating now. So I think you guys should be really, really excited.
Yeah. If I can just add, you know, and I think when you and I have talked about it, you're catching a great wave of the still existing model of foreign broadcasters connecting with a studio like Sony and figuring out a model by which they can rent and adapt Sony's old shows, which you're showing them how to do. I think in addition to that, which is going to play out for many years, again, the Netflixes and Amazons are great places to think about because they already are or soon will be international as well. They might almost be one-stop shop. You know, I'm hearing from them, they're launching, if they're not in these different territories, they're launching, you know, Netflix Hungary and Netflix Korea. So it's becoming part of their calculation from the get-go in a way it never was for us professionally, where, as you say, we were in our bubbles. Even the biggest American broadcasters didn't generally look beyond the U.S. But now these guys are very much thinking about what would have cross-border appeal.
In the early 2000s, I worked on the Rugrats, and that was my first viewpoint of the global market, because when we had to write these animations, we couldn't make it strictly American. So you couldn't have anything American or even in English on their shirts, because it had to be able to travel. And so I thought, and we would send our stuff over to Korea, and that was my first glimpse of the global market. And now you're right, Mitch. Now it's exciting. It's so exciting. And I'll tell you something. I worked in London several years ago. There's nothing more exciting than to take the show on the road and to work with English writers, and it's just very exciting. Unless you're married and you have a bunch of kids, then it gets very, very difficult or complicated.
You've seen a new generation of writers because of the global effect. Growing up in Russia and Germany, and writers for television. And then part of that is, is there any room there for young writers who are about to graduate?
Well,
but I have one idea for you. You should do a show called The Russians, which is based on the Americans.
right, actually, you're right.
You got some wonderful.
Oh, for sure, and you know, you could just pull it out of experience. All the mistakes you make over there, it could be the funniest damn show. Absolutely, could be the funniest damn show. But
as I watch you, you're starting to morph into Robin Williams. I swear to God.
I know. I get that. Oh, this is the
aspect to your face.
I know.
That is a little scary.
Let me tell you, Norman. Let me tell you what's even scarier. It was a couple of weeks, or maybe a week and a half after he died. I was walking to the airport, heading to Russia, and a woman who works at the airport on the line, ready to take my passport. Her face blanched. She became so pale, and she looked at me and said, "You look like Robin Williams." I mean, she honestly, for a second there, thought he came to life, or was he really dead? So I had that experience. I've heard that a lot. Yeah, I know. It couldn't be Cary Grant, huh?
So, without necessarily asking you about the particulars, with the shows that you're developing now, is there anything different about your approach, again, based on your age and experience, or your knowledge of the business today, that is markedly different from how you did development in years past?
No. I mean, no. There is, I think it'll, look, I hate to keep talking about myself, but I guess that's why I'm here. we were very, very fortunate. We understood very, very early on that it all starts with that great story. And for you guys, it'll start with that great spec script. Tom and I wrote a spec script. And let me run through it really, really quickly. When I was a young guy, I went to see this show called Alice. It was a show that was set in a diner about waitresses who worked for this irascible owner of this diner. And I always had this idea, wouldn't it be cool if, it always starts with that for me, wouldn't it be cool if Murphy Brown got breast cancer? Wouldn't it be cool if one of the waitresses in the diner finds this lacy little glove in one of the booths? And Mel, the owner, comes over, yells at her for not working, and basically takes this glove and then starts fantasizing about who this sexy woman might be who owns this glove. Well, I never wrote it, and I had the executive producers who met me out of the goodness of their heart, but I never wrote it. So when Tom and I decided to write one script together, we decided to pick Cheers, and I said, I always had this idea, and I pitched it to him, and we just changed it so that Diane finds this trench coat left in the bar, and she starts fantasizing about who this male owner might be. And we left clues in pockets: pipe smoker, smelled of aftershave, opera tickets, or kabuki theater tickets, all these things. And we built a profile of this guy while Sam is yelling at her for not working and being a daydreamer. So we just took that and just moved it over to Cheers, and that got us going. And I don't know if it's the greatest script we wrote, but it's in the top 3 of the greatest scripts we ever wrote. And that's what you guys are going to have to be open to. Just let your minds wander when you're drinking Starbucks someplace. Find that really great, great story, because in the end, I don't think it's changed that much at all. You're going to get the attention from somebody out there because of a script you wrote. And how you get it there, that's changed. And how you meet these people, that will change. But I think in the end, it's always going to be about that great, great story.
Hi, Norm. My name is Samantha, and I'm the one person that's interested in features. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's interesting you bring up stories because I've been struggling a lot with the issue of stories versus concept. And most of my writings, I feel like I've seen it as concepts as stories. So I don't know if you have that same issue when you are delving into what you are writing. Not so much rebooting for Russian television like Bewitched or something like that, but like, original stuff you've worked on and working on.
When you say concept, what is your definition of concept?
My definition of concept is like the premise or a world based around it. Mm-hmm. And then the story is basically just a plot line that runs through an entire film or an episode or something like that.
This is what I would start, because it's so easy. And yes, I've wrestled with this as well, because it's so easy to wrestle with, especially with all these writing courses and writing books, and everybody's got a book on writing out there. But what I found to be, and this is just me, and everybody writes differently, but what I found will help you is forget about the concept, forget even about the structure of your movie. Just think about that one person you're writing about. Whose story are you telling? And as you start to get to know this person, the rest of it will start to take shape. If you start wrestling with working from the outside in, you're going to be so frustrated. You're not, and it's not going to come from your heart. It's going to come from some architectural design place. And so start writing about somebody you know, you love, you've made up, you want to get to know better. And this brings me to my other point is, and so I don't forget it, my suggestion to everybody is forget about the John Truby books and forget about all these key courses. Just read your novels. Read, and read. Because I think something happens when you start to read really great books that you're interested in. You start to become inspired. You start to want to create something that's as beautiful as the story you just read. So I think you're going to learn a lot more. And it could be history books. It could be magazines. It could be an article in the New Yorker. but read, because that's going to inspire you. That's going to give you ideas you never thought you had. Read a magazine on taxidermy. I just read a book called Stiff, because someday I want to write a story about the selling of body parts, because it's a whole trade out there of why you shouldn't get cremated. And I never would have known any of this if I didn't read the book Stiff. So that's my suggestion to you. But start with character. That one character.
Thank you so
Does
much.
that help? Does that help at all, Samantha?
Yeah, it helped me a little bit because I'm struggling with a pilot where I've had to set up where I want to start with like one episode focusing on a character, and I think I've got too hung up on the concept and trying to make political correctness points across versus delving into a story and trying to get people to know my protagonist, a la Orange is the New Black, where you have this white girl that you can relate to go into this strange world that she is not comfortable going into. But as far as the screenplay I've always wanted to write, it's definitely helped me reorganize how I want to write that story and how I want to go with the concept and the format of it. So
Basically what it is, jump on the shoulders or the back of whoever you want to write about and just follow them around and see where they take you. And that will magically, something magical happens when you do that. You start to go into, Blazing Saddles is a perfect example. This was mayhem. This movie was mayhem, but it was all based on this one guy. And so it doesn't matter how big or how intimate your story is. It's always going to be based on Carrie Bradshaw. It's always going to be based on Piper or whatever her name is. It'll be so much more fun than trying to come up with this game plan.
Are you just picking up Blazing Saddles because Norman is here?
I am. Well, and also because my daughter and I have spent I don't know how many years just rewatching that show, rewatching that movie. Just love it to death. I want to meet Norman.
Still working, still working.
Yeah.
Still working.
Yeah. You're still working and the movie still works. Yeah, that's the good news.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would just throw in, I think it's an example of what's been so productive about this program that, Samantha, when you're in the middle of it, I know how frustrating it is, but I think you guys are already operating at a higher level than most people because you're realizing those difficulties and that conflict. And then you benefit from the advice of someone like Norm who's lived it and can be so specific. And I agree with Norm. I think about especially imagine all the pilots we've seen or even worked on through the years where at the end, you look at it and go, that was a fundamental failing. The concept overwhelmed the actual story. Absolutely. The concept was great, but nobody really wants to just watch a concept as an ongoing series.
The perfect example.
Yeah, Norm, I had, you spurred me when you said you found the raincoat and wondered, or the lace glove. I wrote a screenplay once, and somebody had bought a baseball at Dodger Stadium, and it was one of the World Series winning Dodger teams, and the baseball said to Wally Ward, best wishes to Wally Ward, and he said, who's Wally Ward?
Yeah.
Right. And I wrote an outline, and we never went forward. But that was such a spur, and I love this story, and I wish I could take. It's not my idea. The story's mine, but the idea that spurred me was just wonderful. I would really like to write that, but.
And Samantha, that's sort of what you're looking for. You're looking at something that is just, you want to know the answer to whatever story you're posing. That's the fun of writing. You can get Final Draft is a trap a little bit, and I use it, but it's everything looks like a script, and everything is so formatted. Sometimes, you know what? Take a pencil and a piece of paper. I actually call pencils the Note Stick 2000. It's the greatest invention. Wireless, no batteries, lasts forever. And so take your Note Stick 2000, take a piece of paper to Starbucks, wherever you like to hang out, and just muse. It is the greatest thing in the world. And once you muse for 45, 50 minutes,
Right.
see if you can then take it and run with it as a script.
Exactly, yeah.
Hey, Norm, I'm curious. I think another good thing, I very much agree with you. I've said to these guys, they picked the right time to be born. I think, as challenging as it is, it's more exciting than any era that we've all lived through. And I think among the good things is also that we're seeing much more what I'll call sort of genre fluidity among writers and viewer expectations and all that. And I'm just curious, you've done very well as a comedy writer. Either what's the furthest you pushed in terms of genre expectations, or are there any things you have wanted to try that your own image of yourself as a comedy writer have kept you from trying?
Well, this is where Russia came in, and this is where the 80s, the show I talked about that we developed over there, came in. I came back a different writer. And I'm doing it now, I'm creating two very different types of shows that are sort of a hybrid. I mean, if you had to start, now it's not going to mean anything to 25-year-olds, but I'm creating a show called Shoe that is a little bit of Barney Miller and a little bit of I don't know what. But I'm trying to merge the old-time ensemble comedy with almost like The Office or something. I don't really know how to even, and it's truly a dramedy because I have absolute dramatic moments. I have a murder. A guy accidentally shoots himself in the third scene. And yet I have really high comedy as well. I think I'm trying to merge comedy with true drama, not just dramedy like Felicity or all these types of shows. Orange is the New Black is sort of the closest I think you can point to, because you don't really know how to encapsulate that show, and that's what I want to do. I want to be able to make people laugh and make people say, you can't do that in a comedy, all in the same episode. I want to surprise people.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to Norman's question, though, about the young writers in Russia. And yes, I've seen such a huge change. It started with a bunch of thugs that I worked with in 2008, because television really was the bastard child of theater. And I remember I was casting Bewitched, and we had, 60 or 70 actresses or actors come into the studio to audition. The minute 6 o'clock rolled around, they were all gone, because they were all had plays on the stage in Moscow. It's a theater-heavy city. And so television back then was nothing, and the writers were, I don't know why they were even doing it. These were writers that were mathematicians. They were all analysts, and suddenly they're writing television. They're going from left to right brain people. And today it's different. Now they're actually going to school to learn how to write. They're listening to us, and they're so in tune with what's going on here. They love American shows. So this global market has helped them as well. So now we're starting to see real writers. I've got a showrunner over there that if it wasn't for the language, he could come over here and absolutely run any show. He's just got that leadership quality. It's really the first guy I've seen with this leadership quality, and not just leadership like you do this. His staff will follow him into fire to please him. He just knows how to praise them and to diminish them in a way, all in the same day. But they love him and they do the best work for him, and it's just amazing to see only 7 years later. So there's some really good writers coming up. Actually, my dream, as we were talking about it in college, my dream is to bring them over here and you guys over there, and to have you guys sit in the Russian writing room and have them sit in an American room. That's something I really would like to do, and somehow work out with whomever.
Norman, if that could happen, we would be happy to bring some of your Russian writers into the room. They come over for a couple of weeks to see how we work.
Oh, they'd love it.
My father was born in Ukraine. So
oh, yes, you know.
we would welcome that. We have question here from Benson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question because earlier you mentioned about times when you were inexperienced as a writer and how you may or may not have known how to navigate certain situations as they were coming up. So, like, this is a hypothetical situation, but like in the event, like we as writers, someone likes a concept we developed, we have a script they decide, the network decides to buy it. But we're not in a position to be a showrunner because we don't have experience. What happens after that? Are we obviously I assume we're on the writer's staff for the show that we
For sure.
But
For sure.
do they pair us with somebody who shows us the ropes that, you know, eventually 2 or 3 seasons later we become, I guess, a showrunner in a sense, or are we just learning for the lifetime of that show and never really given an opportunity, even though it's our show?
You know, I would have answered this question a little differently 4 or 5 years ago before I had this abundance of confidence, which I don't know where it came at 60, but it's there. I would have said 5 years ago, they will pair you up with somebody who has done it before, which is most likely true. The producer that you go into business with will have a relationship with a showrunner who may be completely wrong for your show, by the way, but they have a relationship with them, and the network has a relationship with them, with him or her, and then you're on the staff, and that's the way it would work. What I would do now, though, is sell yourself in a way that makes you sound like you're the only one who can run the show. I would really come at them with complete confidence and a great sales job. I mean, it's all going to come down. Look, all of this stuff, which I also learned too late, was sometimes it has nothing to do with a really, really good idea. Sometimes you just don't get into the kissing stage of dating before you actually start dating. And you have to build a rapport with these executives. They have to trust you. You're trusting you with a very, very expensive product. And they don't want to take a chance that, number one, you're going to botch it, or number two, they're going to lose their jobs. So I would really now just build a rapport with that executive, and through the course of days, weeks, months, build yourself up in their eyes so that you can run this thing. You're the only one who should run this thing. This is your voice. Whatever you come up with, make sure it's your voice. There is nobody else that can write a script like the sound of a script like you. And in the end, maybe they will bring somebody on, but I think the new girl is being run by somebody who never wrote before, or she had very limited experience. And either way, you sell a show to a network, whether you're on the staff or running the show, it's all good.
Thank you.
But
No, I was just going to add, I think I agree with you certainly about having the confidence and building yourself as such, as you say, where others have the confidence that you really are the person. You know, in this case, Benson, his show is the guy to run it, right, and to bring his vision to life. I think on your earlier point, though, about arrogance, I think there's an equal trick involved, which is while being the boss, even admittedly at a young age or with less experience than other contemporaries, the equal trick is to be open to and encouraging of surrounding yourself with the actual experience of making the show, right? That you know, we all know, you guys have seen it even in the course of the program, just making your own stuff. The realities of casting, of locations, of managing your budget, of delivering stuff on time, etc., are, as you say, are so pressure-filled, can be so crushing that I think you're crazy, and you're ultimately getting in your own way if you don't say, well, that's why I'm going to find not just hire, but actually collaborate with, partner with, the best line producer, the best director, the best casting person, the best actors who in addition to their skills, are going to go on this journey with me and partner with me on it, right? So I don't know how you sort of get to that magic sauce, but I think somehow you got to make that.
Yeah, it'll all come down to how excited they are. If you come up with something that's so fantastic, so many things will open up to you that you can't even predict right now. And what I was going to also say is it's a shame because in the old days, there were freelance assignments. So you were in the room, you were watching the process happen. And depending on the show, you were watching editing, you were watching casting, you were involved, depending on how open the showrunner was, in learning the business from the outside. And it's a shame that that doesn't exist anymore. Because Tom and I did it for 2.5 years and we learned so much.
So when you sell one or both of these shows, when it comes to making it, what are you now going to do differently? Either in the actual running of your next show, whether it is, because you want to do something differently from the way it was done in years past, Murphy Brown or anywhere else, or what you've now learned, let's say, from your Russian experience?
First of all, I would have a very small room. Somewhere along the line in the early 90s, these rooms ballooned to 10, 12. Roseanne had, I heard people were holding up numbers in order to pitch their jokes. So we would keep this room really small. I would keep it, I wouldn't be bullied into taking on writers that are maybe hot, maybe with a deal with one of the channels. And I would pick my own people, and not always good friends of mine, because there are some friends, I think about it. I think, well, this person is a really good friend and a really good writer, but completely wrong for this project. So I would I would cherry pick all the people that are involved with the show. And I think that's all the difference I would make. Other than that, I think it's the same process. And what I'm trying to do is just build in the zeitgeist. Always think about the zeitgeist of why you're telling this series now. Because it's really, really important. I had a show that based on a Las Vegas headliner that got me a lot of work, never got made. Oh, Mitch, we pitched it to you when you were at CBS. Never got made. And just recently, somebody at CAA, an agent, read it and loved it. But he did say, we want to do this, but what is the zeitgeist of this show? And I'm going, oh my God, he's absolutely right. Because this guy, Webb Sharp, doesn't exist anymore in Vegas. It was written 15, 18 years ago. It's not anything, or 14 years ago. It's not anything that has anything to do with today's society. So I went back and rethought about him and developed a whole different guy with a whole different show. So that's one of the two that I'm working on.
That's great on every level, Norman, including now remembering how much I liked that at the time. But you raise a great point, which is, I think, a lot of people talk about if you're lucky enough to last, at some point somebody asks you, hey, what's the show you've always wanted to do? And you go back to one of those favorites. And I'm not sure, frankly, enough people are as productively self-critical as you are. And so it seems to me now, remembering that concept, to either go with, okay, what would my vision, what would that guy be now?
Yeah.
Which is one. Or is there something different about Vegas as it is today?
Right.
By scratch, and either can work. Obviously, you've gone with the first, and I imagine it's great because the original idea was great. On the question though of what you will do differently, are there any other logistical things that come into play for you? Would you conceivably commission more freelance scripts? Would you insist on getting ahead of? Would you want more written before you actually start production? Are there other things that you would just say to the studio, look, I'm not going to go over budget, but here's how I'm doing?
Well, I'm sort of doing that on it's great question. The first thing I would do, now that I'm an older guy, I would hire, especially mine are very diverse shows. And my dream would be to have different people from every walk of life work on the show. That's the first thing. I would be very socially conscious. And not because I'm out of the goodness of my heart, but because I feel like those people can all bring in something that I know nothing about. One takes place in South Central Los Angeles. What am I doing writing that? But I've done enough research and talked to enough guys that I've worked with on other shows to sort of give me a little bit of a handle at this stage in how the story would be told. So that's the first thing I would do. And the rest of it is really coming in the writing stage. I'm really, I don't want people to say, oh yeah, well, I mean, this sounds just like Murphy Brown, and that's 25 years old. I'm trying to incorporate a much more of a single camera effect. So I'm designing these scripts so that they're both on location and in interior in the studio. And I'm trying to keep this more filmic than I would have back 10 years ago even. I'm trying to make this so that you're actually in the room as opposed to watching a play, because that's the way most of these shows were designed, right? You're watching this proscenium, you're always watching the shows from the outside in, and I want to be in the room with all these people. So most of it's happening in the writing stage.
Hi, my name is Jamie. Just
Jamie.
a question related to what you were just saying about where exactly do the shows you're creating go? Like, I guess, is it like, did they watch it on TV, like equivalent to like a broadcast for us? And in terms of like Netflix making shows available overseas, like our kinds of shows, so say like Orange is the New Black, wouldn't that kind of hinder your job opportunities in terms of like they wouldn't create an Orange is the New Black for Russia if they're already watching ours and enjoying ours?
Yeah, it's actually a good point. That's actually a really good point. I don't quite understand it either, to be honest with you. I don't understand if they can get Roseanne, why they want to actually put on their own Roseanne. So I don't even know. I don't understand how that's working. Because you're right, theoretically, this should actually hinder the business that I'm in. But it doesn't for some reason. I don't understand what Sony does to sell these projects. And I want to learn this someday. But all I know is, even though they're watching Roseanne and Married with Children over there, the American version, especially now on computers, for some reason they still want to do their own homegrown version.
I think I can shed a little bit of light there, but
Please.
I'll ask, just describe, to Jamie's first question, what's the viewing experience, say, in Moscow right now? How many channels do they have? Are they over the air, cable or satellite delivered? Do they yet have Netflix or Amazon or equivalent, broadband channels yet?
I was just leaving in December, and Netflix had just started there. So there is a Netflix Moscow. And the rest of it is just a wonderful, it's like the new frontier. They have ratings you just wouldn't believe. It's like the old days. It's like the 1960s and 70s there. Russia is a huge country, as we know. And so there isn't cable. There are main channels. And right now there are two main channels that we deal with. One is called CTC, or STS, depending on if you're using the Russian or English letters. And the other one is TNT, and not the TNT we have here, but a different TNT. Although that TNT is becoming very similar to Fox, and CTC is very similar to, I would say, like an NBC. They are much more grounded. And so you have Everybody Loves Raymond over there. You're going to have Roseanne there. So maybe it's more like the old days of ABC. So those are the two main channels. Then they have state-owned channels, and there they sell you the propaganda. And then many news channels. And we do get CNN, but it's dubbed, so I don't understand it. There's no. I don't watch very much television there because it's in Russian. So even the shows that I do, I like to see what they look like when they're eventually edited and aired. And I can't even understand. I know the script pretty well, but I can't even enjoy my own show over there. So it's, I guess in a way, it's very similar to where we were in the 70s. There really isn't cable that I know of, and they really haven't embraced the computer like we do here. It's still about the television set. And I also should add that everybody lives in apartments, very similar to New York. And in those apartments are a lot of people. There's a lot of big families all sharing a small space. And so the viewing habit is very similar to where we were in the 60s and 70s as well. And because they don't make a lot of money there, and because the ruble's in the toilet, there aren't a lot of sets. And that's part of the beauty of going over there. It is almost like going back in time. You're going back in time when you still walk in parks and where people aren't on their phones every second of the day. And they're watching television the way we used to watch TV as a shared experience. And people talk about shows the next morning in the writing room like we used to. And they're not talking about, yes, they'll call it up on their computers. We do, it's very modern there. But they're not, the viewing habit starts with the television set, which I love. I also, this is the odd thing too, as I always make excuses for sounding like an old man. I have an interpreter over there, Vanya Basov, and I said to him, would you like to see one of my favorite situation comedies? I said, I want to warn you, it was in the 1970s, but I'm curious to see if you get anything from it. And I pulled up an episode of All in the Family. And he watched it. He loved it. Well, he binge watched all, whatever it was, 5, 6 seasons of that series. So it just shows you that even though it's politically heavy, because it's so Americana, still the great storytelling and the great development of character traveled all the way to Moscow. And so it taught me a lot. And he's turned on other Russian, and he's 28 years old. He's a young guy. So he's turned other people onto All in the Family.
Yeah, you actually kind of just answered what I was thinking about. Is like, what ages do you have like a bracket of ages you're trying to reach in terms of these shows?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
That's kind of what I was asking about. I was thinking about the different age groups you're kind of aiming towards capturing shows.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. It goes across the board. The viewing audience is so big that it cuts across all demographics. We're not really aiming towards we know basically what we're aiming towards, but we really don't say we want a young person's show. It just so happens the business I'm in is robbing the library, and we know what shows should be able to travel there. We're not really thinking about age as much as will it translate to a Russian audience. I think.
Are you doing then what hasn't existed here for many years, which is based on what you were describing about living situations? Are you actually still making shows for the old so-called family audience where lots of people together of different ages will be watching? For sure. We believe that I was just over there, what it was now, 2011. I was over there for 9 months, actually, and Phil Rosenthal was over there just starting Raymond, and he was doing his documentary, and we always believed that show would travel. We believed that this would tap into the family viewing habits, that the family would become universally engaged with this show, and we were right because the show's still on the air. It's going on. I think we're up to like episode 500. This cast has done more Raymonds than the original cast. Because we do 2.5 shows a week, we burn through all the original shows in about 2.5 years. And so for the last, whatever it's been, 3.5 years, we've been doing original shows. And it was just picked up for another 50. This show will probably hit about 600 and some odd episodes by the time it's done. So it shows you. So how does, beyond then just the business motive of Sony is used in mining its own library, How do they determine one of the old American shows, as broad as Raymond, or as different as Raymond is Bewitched, is from Roseanne? How do they make a reasonable guess what's going to appeal to a Russian audience?
I think once you start living there a while, you get a really good sense of what won't work there. Bewitched actually did not work there. Bewitched was number one, because we're doing so many episodes a week, was feasibly impossible to produce with that kind of schedule. And also, it was two 1960s. What we do is adapt these scripts. So we try to stay as true as possible to the original script. And then you change it for, obviously, cultural reasons. But when it came to Bewitched, it was very 1960s, and it suddenly wasn't a matter of adapting the script. We had to completely rewrite this script, and it suddenly became a different business. But when it comes to a Roseanne, I don't think a Roseanne would have actually worked 7 years ago, because men were very threatened by a strong woman. But times have changed, and everybody's got Facebook, and everybody's engaged in the world. And I think even the Russians realize, oh, it's okay to have a woman run the household. And so times have changed there. There's just, I don't know how they exactly, I would have jumped on Roseanne, frankly, about 3-4 years ago. They were talking about it 3-4 years ago and didn't jump on it. But I still think it would have worked there then. But I think you just understand the cultural feel of that country and just make a reasonable guess if it'll work. And interesting enough, while Raymond is a huge hit over there, they brought it to Egypt, where it was an abysmal failure. It didn't last very long. And you can sort of understand why. Just the cultural differences just made it too foreign for the foreign market.
Anyone else? Hey, Norm, we want to be mindful of your time and the generosity with which you offered it. I will just ask you, what else should we be asking you about? And or any further words of wisdom you'd like to impart, keeping in mind that these students are going to be going, hopefully, into the job market for real in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, you thought you felt pressure as a showrunner.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would tell you guys is not to think of yourselves any older than you are. You've got your whole life in front of you. And why not? Why not get on a plane and give it a shot? Why not just take a chance? Because personally, I think look, I came from a farm in upstate New York, and who was I to think I was going to go to California and actually do it? I mean, what are the odds? But there was just something inside of me. And by the way, I was not a very confident kid, and not as charming as I am now. And but there was just something inside of me as akin to what a like Michael Jordan must have felt like at 8 or 9 years old. He probably just knew there was something inside of him that was different than all the other guys on the playground. So if you have that feeling inside of you, if you really feel like you can do this, and I would also say the number one thing is, my opinion is, don't have a plan B. If there's a plan B, if there's a second career you're even thinking about, do it. Because this journey is so tough, and there's no net, there's no safety net. There's nothing you can hang on to, there's no logic. One person will hate your script, one person will call you a genius. There's nothing in it to drive you but yourself. And so you've got to really think, is this for you? And if you have that plan B, because I see it again and again, you're just going to eventually either move back or find something else, go to that plan B. But what I was going to say is just do it. Just jump on a plane if you have that feeling that you can actually do it. And if you can come out here with scripts that you can either do for the web or show people once you're here, then why not? It's better to fail than to kick yourself black and blue in your 40s and think, why didn't I just take a shot?
So your Cortex, you're saying go to Hollywood and burn the ships.
Exactly right. You know, we need you. We need really good writers out here. There's a lot of crap on that television, and so much that it's almost mind-boggling. Even I sit down at the computer every day going, why am I doing this? Because there's so much out there that you're wondering, if they commission these scripts, what do they turn down? Because there's some real dogs on that. But at the same time, my God, you've got so many different genres you can write for now. And people haven't even touched on mixing drama with reality shows. There's so much you can do, so many hybrids you can play with that only you will come up with. And once you come up with it, you're going to know it. And when you know it, you're going to want to do it. So be brave and don't be too conservative. And just understand that you can't, I don't believe you can give yourself a deadline. I don't know about Mitch, I don't know about Norman, but to say I'm going to give myself 2 years, because you most likely will not make it in 2 years. You may not even make it in 4 years. I don't know. You're not going to write one script. You're probably going to write 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 scripts before anybody notices you're on the face of the earth. So if that sounds fun, if that doesn't sound so scary, then come out and give it a shot. Because I'll tell you, if you do make it and you're working with a group of people that you love, there's no better life.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, your advice.
Thank you, guys.
Be well. Thanks.
All right, Mitch, thank you so much. Norman, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good luck to everybody.
That's some questions.
I didn't.
I'll tell. Hey, Andrew, so I think this should now be our